As we approached the end of the Zoom interview, the words of the radiologist seemed to fade away, almost unnoticed, until their significance suddenly struck me. On the opposite side of the screen, two radiologists, each from a different corner and with a different hospital background visible behind them, discussed the enormous benefits of the artificial intelligence system they had implemented in breast cancer and pelvic cancer diagnosis since this year. The AI system identifies these conditions based on various radiological images and subsequently marks relevant organs in a 3D model for the treating physicians and surgeons. The extreme level of detail in the drawings facilitate more accurate diagnosis and allows for more accurate prediction of the outcome of surgery or other treatment. Both patients and clinicians benefit from increased clarity, resulting in a more efficient and potentially successful treatment process. "Now that we know how quickly this AI can work," said one of them, "it's simply not morally justifiable to wait for a human doctor." He shrugged his shoulders before relaxing them again. We had already spoken for almost an hour. The two radiologists, myself, and a postdoctoral researcher for my research project team, who was working remotely from his Dutch studio but would be conducting anthropological fieldwork in this hospital in a few weeks' time. We were all tired from talking, our heads filled with the technological specifics we needed to grasp to understand the implications of the AI system that had recently been introduced in this hospital's radiology department. The radiologist on the left side of my screen occasionally disappeared from view. He would roll his office chair towards the door of his office, which was slightly ajar. Unavailable for our view was the face of a colleague who would be asking him if he was still busy or if somebody could be called back as soon as he was finished with us. The radiologist continued to hastily return to his screen, emphasizing that he did so not just out of politeness towards us, but also because he was genuinely proud of our subject matter. He had himself helped to train the AI system, and now he worked with it daily. The effects of this collaboration were superb. This AI system is capable of creating a highly detailed drawing of the areas where cancer cells are present in the breast or pelvic region within approximately a quarter of an hour. For comparison, a human doctor would take at least 4 hours to do so. Thanks to this AI, a waiting patient can receive a much faster diagnosis of their condition, explained one of the radiologists. And a treating physician can also gain a better understanding of what to do. This reduces, obviously, a lot of stress, and sometimes it even saves a life. The radiologists were far from naive or reckless in their discussion of the digitization of healthcare. During the interview, they emphasized multiple times that the AI system would never be able to replace a human doctor. Just like we did, they were aware of the stories that warn against relying solely on AI. Even though this type of AI is extremely good at recognizing patterns in images, there's always the possibility that the system will make a mistake, right? And in those cases, there needs to be a human doctor who can evaluate the outcome and identify the error. Otherwise, the potential consequences can be enormous. To be able to fulfill the role of AI supervisor, a human doctor must be well trained in reading radiological images and have experience in drawing organs and breast cancer cells. Drawing is one way that novice radiologists learn to read the body and recognize abnormalities. Therefore, the radiologist explained that their department requires all co-assistants to practice reading and drawing radiological images frequently during their first few months of working at the hospital. We researchers, we nodded in agreement. This was exactly what our project was about, the human supervisors of AI. And really, over the years, I had spoken to dozens of professional caretakers about this topic, and many of these conversations had degenerated into philosophical debates about what AI can and cannot take from human capabilities, and what aspects of human work should always remain unique to humans. This conversation was no different. The radiologist from our Zoom interview talked about the intuitive feel that something is not right with a patient's health and the ability to visualize where cancer cells are located. forms of knowledge that can only be built through embodied practice, through speaking with thousands of patients, through reading hundreds of radiological images, and through making dozens of drawings, the organs, the cells, the bones. And then the radiologist said it. "But the drawing training for new doctors must of course stop," he said. "Now that we know how quickly AI can work, it's simply no longer morally justifiable to wait for a human doctor. We can't keep doing this to our patients." His words echoed in my head, still after the interview had ended. I packed my laptop into a bag with clean clothing and a toothbrush, locked my office, hurried to a train station, and finally embarked on a train to München, where I would give a talk about my research at a German conference. "We cannot keep doing this." I repeated his sentence in my head while finding a seat in the train. I would be in here for 9 hours or so, and I looked forward to the journey. I needed the time to understand what had just revealed itself to me. That would not be moral, he had said, but what he meant was that would no longer be moral. Because this technology had only been introduced to the hospital a year ago or so. So quickly had it been able to change what used to be normal into immoral. And this is what technology does, I pondered. It's astonishing how quickly it changes our perceptions of time. We all know this. Just think about how anxious we feel if a friend or a lover doesn't respond back quickly on WhatsApp, and how inefficient this train ride seemed now that we have all become accustomed to fast planes that take us to the sun in just a few hours. "What is decisive," wrote Edwin Strauss when he was discussing the psychology of distances, "is not the objectively measured distance, but the relation of such distance to potentiality." Well, I believe that a similar argument can be made for the relation between technology, potentiality, and our moral beliefs. In this logic, what is possible should be done, or otherwise it seems unethical. Increasingly in my research, I encounter doctors who find the waiting of their patients intolerable, yes, even immoral. "Imagine you are that patient sitting there waiting," a radiologist said to me once, as we walked through the waiting room in the oncology department. She raised her chin slightly and pointed to the light green plastic chairs. Some of them were occupied. A young woman was sitting with her hand on her lap, held by the hand of a man. A mother was watching her toddler play with a toy house in the corner of the waiting room. The radiologist and I turned to the corner of the hallway, and only when we were out of sight of the waiting patients did she continue speaking to me. "You wouldn't want to sit there any longer than necessary. You get crazy from waiting. Waiting too long is inhumane, so we do everything we can to provide clarity as quickly as possible." During my fieldwork, I would hear many more similar statements from doctors and nurses about waiting. I consistently recorded them in my notebook, at first because they, in my opinion, captured the emotional involvement that many professional caretakers feel towards their patients. Only later, when I entered the word waiting into my analysis form to find back some telling quotes, I started to see a different pattern emerge. This word, waiting, was almost always described as having a relative value, with situations involving waiting too long or unnecessarily long waiting. For these doctors, their values change along with what is possible. As my train arrived in München, it was near night. It was dark outside, and I felt slightly uncomfortable walking to my hotel, 25 minutes away or so, through unfamiliar streets. Some parts seemed to me a bit dodgy. I used my GPS. Don't we all use GPSs to find our ways nowadays? My father is still able to orient himself when he needs to travel through his home country. I am one of those members of the new generation that has no clue where to go unless a voice in my cell phone tells me where. Technology has made it too easy for me to not develop my capacity to orient myself based on memory and intuition. And likewise, technology changes how we experience time. Since professional caretakers know how quickly AI can create a diagnostic image that can lead to more precise diagnosis, and on the basis thereof a specific treatment, it can feel frustrating to them, indeed even morally wrong, to cling to a slower workflow that was still the standard until very recently. And because their ideas on what is just and moral and tolerable are shifting, they are making new decisions that they would have considered too risky until recently, such as stopping a training that is crucial for young doctors in order to safely collaborate with AI in the future. I stood impatiently in line at the hotel reception, and I really wished I wouldn't have to wait any longer. I was tired. I wanted to go to bed. Tomorrow would be a long conference day. New technology degrades human tolerance for waiting and uncertainty. Ultimately, waiting is uncertainty for what is to come. To wait for something, whether this be a diagnosis brought to us by a physician or the return of another person important to our lives, is not to have control about the outcome. And that can be hard. To wait patiently must be even harder. In fact, the word patience comes from the Latin verb patior, which means to suffer. Waiting patiently literally means suffering through the present moment, tasting it to the fullest in the belief that eventually something there will manifest itself to us. This concept of patience has never been particularly attractive for humans, and now, with AI, it's something that people are wanting to avoid at all costs.